Did it start as a hobby, or has it always been like a profession?
Oh no, it was a hobby. I was only 11 or 12 at that point.
What are some of the most innovative things that you've seen since you've been playing for so long that have changed wargaming? Has there anything that comes to mind, like some kind of mechanics?
Good grief. I mean, there's been a lot. I started in the hobby back in the days of the Avalon Hill standard CRT. And since then, everything has changed. And even the earliest days, we were just talking last night about Battle of the Bulge in 1965, maybe. In their advanced game, used a different kind of combat system to the classic Avalon Hill game, and that was a big deal at the time. It was like, wow, this is really innovative. There's different kinds of results than DR2, AR2, and elimination and exchange, and that was essentially it at the time. So, and of course nowadays you've got all sorts of stuff. The whole concept of mechanized movement was a big one back in the late 60s, I guess. Modern war games, like some of these giant things that these guys are playing behind us here, are almost unrecognizable from the original stuff. The only thing that's the same is hexagon maps and cardboard counters. And even that's giving way to all sorts of wooden bits and miniatures, and so it's hard to pin down any specific innovations because there have been so many.
Well, you definitely mentioned the wooden bits and stuff, and of course that's what we do at Columbia Games and stuff. What games have you played? Have you played any of the block war games at all?
Oh yeah, I've played a lot of block war games.
Which ones come to mind?
Well, let's see. The original block game was Napoleon, and I loved that one. That was a great game. Most recently, the Columbia games that I've got have been things like Borodino, and I'm trying to remember which one is the Columbia World War II game.
The Eurofront?
Victory. Yeah, Victory in Europe.
We have
Victory
that too.
In Europe,
okay,
with the oval map.
Yeah,
that was a treat. And then there's a lot of other ones people have been doing lately too. The Vento Nuovo games from Europe have been interesting. They've got some interesting, unusual systems that have been fun, and of course, even some GMT games have adopted blocks. And I was using blocks for a while in my Napoleonic tactical game design, and that's evolved over 20 years into something completely different. So.
Yeah, it's definitely been catching a little bit of steam lately. I mean, we have Worthington Publishing now making some games. I mean, so it's not something that's probably going to die out anytime soon. I mean, you get the whole fog of war aspect, and just it's just fun to play with the blocks, I think.
Oh yeah, well, I mean, it was one of those things where the first time I saw one, I was like, wow, that was a great idea. That's such a natural thing. It's like, why didn't I think of that? That kind of thing. And whenever you run into something like that, when you shake your head and say, well, geez, I could have thought of that. Why didn't I think of that? It's something that is going to catch on because it's just a natural sort of innovation to the process of gaming. So
right,
yeah.
When Peter Perla is not playing war games, what game's he cracking open? What kind of game, if not a specific?
Well, I play all sorts of games. The Euro style games, I play those. I recently played Terraforming Mars, for example.
Oh, okay.
That was interesting, and I guess you might call those war games the Academy games, Vikings, and those things. Yeah. And I generally am pretty eclectic. My daughter, who's now in her 30s, she turned out to have the gaming gene, and so we've played things together with her. I just had a game called Hardback that I got her for Christmas.
You've been playing the games a long time. What do you think are three most important things, and if you can come up with more, you can, about teaching somebody that's new to wargaming how to play a wargaming? And what games would you suggest, and what games would you tell them to stay away from?
Well, one of the things that I've thought about professionally is why is it that military types do not quickly adapt to board games. And I think one of the main reasons is that a war game is built on a mental framework that you have to have in place where you won't be able to grasp it. My PhD advisor is one of the most brilliant guys that I've ever met. And when I was at graduate school, he discovered that I and another guy, another one of my fellow grad students, were wargamers. And he said, I had a friend of mine and I, we got in, we thought we'd get into these things, and we went and bought this game called 1914. And we tried to play it, and we couldn't get it, and we took it back. And I was just stunned. It was like, John, I played that game when I was 14. You couldn't understand the game? You couldn't? No, it was too strange. We couldn't get our heads around it. So it wasn't anything to do with native intelligence. It wasn't anything to do with a mathematical mind. It was something to do with how you think about playing games, and what kind of game playing background did you have that you can hang the ideas off of and say, oh, okay, that's sort of like this, or that's sort of like that. And so I think part of it is you need to, if you have people that are new, that are interested in war games, probably the easiest thing to do is get them interested in a period that they're interested in. If they're interested in Napoleonics, for example, you want to get them by showing them a Napoleonic game. And if you have some idea of what kinds of games they played in the past, then you might be able to target the level of, it's not really even complexity, it's the level of oddness. How different is this game from other things you've seen in the past? And if you can do that so that they have something to hang their hats on, it's a lot easier for them to grasp. There's a podcast called Ludology. I don't know if you know Ludology, but it's been on for a while. And a few years ago, they did a really interesting episode in which they talked about this subject of, in terms of Eurogaming, getting people to understand new games, and how it was the concept of schema, mental schema, that you have to have some sort of a framework to fit these ideas into, or you never really get the game. And so you need to have that. So you need to figure out, how can I help this person understand this game? And you can often, with war games, you can often do it with history.
Okay.
So this is how this game is representing the things you know about historically. And so that, I think that's the key, is helping people get the concepts based on things they already know.
How about detail in war games? How much is too much? How little is too little? To make it a true, well, maybe saying a true war game is a dangerous word, because you're going to get a lot of response from a lot of people.
Right. Well, but that's the point, right? Other people want different things in their games, and I mean, you've got your classic treadhead, right? They want to know what's the armor thickness and what's the muzzle velocity of the 88 millimeter gun, and how can it penetrate 30-degree angled armor at 500 yards. Okay, they want all that detail. They want Tobruk or one of those kinds of games where you're tracking individual shots and that sort of thing. And then you've got people who are not interested in the technology so much as they are in the decision making and the strategy and the maneuver of the forces. And so in a general sense, I guess I would say that the detail, you want the detail to support the goal of the game, which is to get it in the brain of the players. Get the players the game takes place in the minds of the players, and so you need the detail to get the information into their minds, so that they're playing the game in a way that is both realistic to them, teaches them something, but most importantly, they have fun. Yeah. And so there's no answer to that question, no single answer to that question. Again, I point to the guys behind us playing this massive Twilight in the East World War I game. The amount of detail in that is amazing.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and so it's hard, and so that's a challenge. And then you've got Down in Flames, which I was playing this morning. That's not very detailed. It's got enough flavor to it that it tastes really good when you play it. You have a great time. So, yeah. as they like to say, it's a big tent, and just about everybody can fit underneath it.
Okay. You mentioned you thought Victory in Europe was a treat. Can you elaborate on what you thought of that?
Well, it was one of this class of games about the European World War II, in which the players aren't really handicapped so much by the history of the war, and you have a lot more flexibility, particularly at the beginning, to both politically and militarily to take things in different directions. And the block part of it is always interesting because you have an opportunity to do strategic deception, which is so difficult to do. Especially in a World War II Europe game. Everybody, the Germans are going to attack France, and then they're going to attack Russia, and then the Allies will come in. It's all going to be on rails. But that's not the case with Victory in Europe.
One last question then, and I'll let you go so you can get on the gaming. Peter Perla, what's the future in store for him?
I'm finishing up my last professional project, and that's going to be done at the end of July, and I'm going to head off to WBC with my pals Mark Herman and Rich Ferris and company, and play some games, and then I'm retiring from the DoD business, and I've got game designs to work on and probability and statistics books to think about, and all sorts of interesting stuff.
So retiring, not retiring.
Retiring from government service, shall we say.
There you go. Going on to passion sounds like a good plan. Thank you very much.
You're quite welcome.
I do appreciate it.